We may be on the other side of the holiday season, but that doesn't mean we can't find reasons to celebrate. There's Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day, engagement parties, retirement celebrations, Mondays, Fridays. Another thing to celebrate, we are living in 2023, a time when those libations that add to celebrations can be delivered to your door. No more missing out on jokes or games because you had to get more wine. No more putting on pants to leave your house while in the middle of binging a show. In less than an hour, Drizzly can have beer, wine, and spirits delivered to your home. Simply use the #1 alcohol delivery app, Drizzly. Place your order, and boom, start that next episode, and you'll be enjoying a beverage before it's over. So download the Drizzly app, or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com, and get your favorite drinks delivered today.
This is Murder in the Rain, where each week Emily Rowney, Alisha Holland, and Josh McCullough tell true crime stories of the Pacific Northwest. Murder in the Rain contains graphic content. Listener discretion is advised. Last week, I told you about just a few of the incidents of officer-involved shootings so far this year. The first United States climate activist to be killed by authorities, Tyre Nichols, whose death and the subsequent charges to stem from it are being looked at as a blueprint for change, and the 3 men, Oscar Sanchez, Keenan Anderson, and Takar Smith, who were killed in Los Angeles within 48 hours of each other. Today, I'll be focusing on one case, that of Manuel Ellis of Tacoma. His beating and restraint-induced death was horrific, but hope remains that the responsible parties will face justice. A Washington Post investigation found that in 2015, 25% of those killed by police were deemed, quote, mentally unstable. An LA Times report found that in LA County, from 2000 to January 2023, 993 people have been killed by police. Almost all of them were men. Less than 10% of LA County's population is Black. However, they make up 24% of those killed by police. White people are more than 25% of the population, but are only involved in 19% of incidents. Since 2000, only 2 officers in LA have had charges brought against them. In all of the U.S., 1,192 people were killed by police in 2022. So let's bring this topic back to the Pacific Northwest. Statistics gathered from 2023 to 2022 put Spokane, Washington in the company of Albuquerque, St. Louis, Oklahoma City, and Bakersfield as a city with one of the highest rates of incidents per population. With a population of 228,989 and 21 police-involved killings in that 10-year span, Spokane had an annual rate of 9.2 killings, as opposed to Seattle's 4.3. By default of the very white population, more white people were killed, but Black people still had a 1.8 times higher rate of being killed than white people. March 3rd, 2020. Oh, what a time. We were 2 weeks away from the country shutting down. The furious uprising surrounded George Floyd's murder at the end of May was still months away. But in Tacoma, Washington, a death at the hands of police led to public outcry and charges for the officers. Before I get into this story, I want to warn listeners that, like the brutal videos we see, what happened to him is graphic. It was as upsetting for me to write as Jessica Williams and Misty Largo's deaths in Street Kids. The details matter here. It's important to understand the extreme cruelty he experienced and how common it occurs. Listener discretion is advised. Manuel Ellis, who went by Manny, had fallen in love with going to church. He didn't just attend, he played drums in the band, and he played them well. The 33-year-old was a lifelong Tacoman, born there in August of 1986. Manny's drum skills were celebrated when he was in high school, earning him a spot in the jazz band. Before graduating in 2004, he would also show off his athletic skills, competing in state competitions for track and field. Manny went on to go to Tacoma Community College, where he took courses in sales and marketing. His long-term goal was to own and operate his own landscaping business. Above all was Manny's family. He had 2 children, 11-year-old Jody and 18-month-old Alexis. He was close to and loved by his mother, grandmother, nieces, and nephews, of which Manny would often babysit. Those who loved him say he had an infectious smile and laugh. He had a good sense of humor on top of being kind, selfless, giving, and nurturing. He delighted in sharing his love of sports, comic books, superheroes, and music with the children in his life. He also loved sharing his newfound love of God and the church. Throughout the years, Manny struggled with addiction issues, but he had support from those who loved him, and he was focused on keeping straight. Besides the drums, Manny would also play the piano or keyboard in church, participating in several services a week. March 3rd, 2020 started as a normal night for Manny. He had been playing drums at church until about 9:30 p.m. At that time, Manny was living with a church member who he looked up to as a mentor. The two men arrived at their home around 10 p.m. Manny FaceTimed his mom from just after 10 until about 10:30. Manny's sister was home at the time, and she knew from his distinctive laugh that it was her brother on the other line. After the call, Manny had some burgers for dinner before going out to the 7-Eleven for a late-night snack, something he often did. Manny and the clerk were friendly, greeting each other as he entered. The clerk later said he was a, quote, really nice kid, really respectful. He always said hi. It was 11:11 p.m. when Manny said goodnight to the clerk, a box of donuts and bottle of water in his hands. Manny started his walk home. About a mile away at 11:16, officers Christopher Burbank and Matthew Collins were completing a traffic stop. Once it was done, they drove away, ending up at the intersection of 96th Street South and Ainsworth Avenue. At 11:21, Manny crossed paths with the patrol car, which was stopped at a red light. Behind their car were two vehicles. Right behind them was witness SM. Her ex-boyfriend was driving another car behind her. He is documented as KL. Their daughters were in the back seat of KL's car as the former couple was dropping them off at SM's sister's home. To the left of the intersection was SC. He was a pizza delivery driver headed back to the restaurant after dropping off a pie. None of the three witnesses knew Manny or the officers before that night. According to witness accounts, SM and KL saw Manny walking on the sidewalk, passing the houses of the neighborhood, probably excited to get into those donuts when he got home. As he walked past the police car, he stopped walking and started speaking with the officer, who remained in the vehicle. It seemed pretty casual. Witnesses even thought at first that either the cops or Manny recognized each other. They had maybe even been old friends. The interaction appeared respectful, peaceful, and there was no aggression shown by either party, at least at first. After that 10 to 15-second interaction, Manny continued his walk. Before cameras were rolling, witnesses claimed the passenger door of the cruiser was thrown open, striking Manny, causing him to fall to his knees. Before he could get up and figure out what was going on, Officer Burbank leapt out of the car and was on top of Manny. Officer Collins then exited the driver's side and walked around the front of the car before joining Burbank on top of Manny. Besides the eyewitnesses, there were digital witnesses. Altogether, SM, KL, and SC filmed the incident with their phone cameras, and there was a doorbell camera across the street that picked up video and audio. There were radio calls and taser activation data, all of which were sent to forensic video analysts Grant Fredericks and David J. Hallamore. Combining all of the information, they were able to create a single video documenting the incident, making a comprehensive timeline of exactly what happened. Once the officers were out of the car, the cameras were rolling. Side note, while there are legal variations from state to state regarding filming police, just know that you can. Our First Amendment right protects it. They are public employees paid by taxpayers. They have no rights to privacy while working. There are some tips, though. Make sure it isn't hidden. That can get tricky with wiretapping laws and other loopholes in attempts to protect the cops. If your phone is taken, they do not have any right to delete photos or videos. That could be considered destruction of evidence and/or obstruction of justice. Obviously, you can't be breaking the laws to film them. For example, you can't be on private property or be obstructing the police while filming. But don't let an officer say, "You're obstructing my duty," make you stop filming. That might be a tactic to try to just trick you into stopping. And anytime you are stopped for anything, you can ask, "Am I free to go?" If you are, then get out of there. Sometimes permission isn't just given in hopes that you'll say something. And as always, the second you are in custody or being questioned, ask for a lawyer. That does not make you guilty. It can keep you safe. In addition to the video compilation, almost all of the information about what took place was found in the public charging documents. So while I do believe in fair trials and being innocent until proven guilty, these documents lay out what happened, as does the video. And with lack of any proof as to what the police say happened, I'm going with what I'm able to read and watch. With eyes and lenses on them, Burbank and Collins, after tackling Manny, began to beat him, striking him multiple times. Burbank then wrapped his arms around Manny and lifted him into the air before slamming him into the pavement. Somehow, as he was doing this wrestling-esque move, Burbank also punched Manny. On the ground, Manny's body curled into the fetal position. As Burbank backed away, the 7-Eleven bag was silently carried off by the night's blustering winds. Then it was Collins' turn. The wording makes it unclear if Collins then jumped or just dropped his weight, but he was then on top of Manny. I was unable to find reports I felt 100% confident in, but several sources said that Manny was about 5'11" and weighed around 170 pounds. Matthew Collins was 6 feet tall, 215 pounds. Christopher Burbank was also 6 feet tall and weighed 160 pounds. For a little history on these two, both men had been on the police force for about 4 years. They had also both been in the Army for 8 years. Matthew Collins had previously been on the SWAT team and had training in grappling martial arts. He even taught classes on defensive tactics. According to records, they had both been trained in crisis intervention. With Collins on top of Manny, he began punching Manny in the head with a closed fist. Staying close, Burbank pulled out his taser and watched on. Collins then struck Manny in the head 4 additional times. With each strike, Manny screamed out in pain. After the 5th hit, SM opened her car door and shouted to the officers, "Hey, stop. Oh my God, stop hitting him, just arrest him." The next move may have been in response to that request, but more likely the men were so far gone in the moment they just didn't even hear her. That was when Collins moved behind Manny, wrapping his arm around the front of his neck and applying a neck restraint, while Burbank continued to hold the taser aimed at Manny. This was all within 56 seconds of Manny being knocked down. At that point, SC, the pizza guy, started to film. To tighten the squeeze of the neck hold, Collins then locked his hands together. This is called a lateral vascular neck restraint, or LVNR. Its definition, as determined from federal case Peterson v. Smith, LVNR is described as a hold that involves bilateral compression of the neck, compressing the carotid arteries, which supply blood to the brain, the jugular veins, which return blood from the brain to the heart, and the carotid sinus, which measures and regulates blood pressure of the brain. An LVNR hold can render someone unconscious in just 4 to 7 seconds. If maximum pressure is applied, like by locking your arms together, courts have determined that the hold can constitute deadly force. For that reason, along with public outcry, some police departments have abandoned chokeholds. All witnesses, both in vehicles and in the surrounding homes that were later interviewed by police, stated they never once saw Manny fight back. He never even attempted to raise a hand or to strike anyone. There were never any signs of aggressive behavior. SC, Pizza Man, later said, quote, "It doesn't seem like he was fighting at all to me. He wasn't even defending himself. He was struggling, but not fighting." As the chokehold continued, Burbank pointed the taser to Manny's chest. In what looked to be a surrender position or just a silent begging to be let go, Manny, with a taser aimed at him and an arm choking him, freed his hands enough to raise his arms over his head with his palms out. Moments like this are why people chant, "Hands up, don't shoot," when marching in the streets. Somehow, Manny and Collins ended up almost upright on their knees. Then, Collins yanked Manny back by his neck and twisted him so they fell to the side. Once again, Manny worked his arms free to show he was unarmed and scared. Burbank must have been scared of the unarmed choking man as well, as he fired his taser straight into Manny's chest and initiated a 5-second round of electricity. Sickened by what he was seeing, KL exited his vehicle. Scared for her ex and her children, SM screamed for him to get back in the car with the kids. It's not that SM didn't want to help, but she was scared. KL was a black man. If he approached the situation, it could have escalated to be even more violent, and 2 men could have ended up dead. KL got back in his car and watched on. The taser was done shocking Manny, and he lay motionless, but still in a chokehold. Finally, Collins released his arm from Manny's neck. Getting up from the ground, Collins then pushed down on Manny's head, mashing it into the hard, gravel-covered pavement. It isn't until that moment that the first radio call surrounding the interaction was made. The officer's location was shared, and it was stated that they were dealing with a, quote, unknown trouble. They hadn't called when first faced with whatever danger they had perceived from Manny, which we'll get into later. They didn't call for backup when the taser was unholstered. Collins then activated his microphone in what is known as a mic click. This is the equivalent of calling 911 and leaving the phone off the hook, or however people would say that now, I guess just not hanging up your phone. With his mic on, Burbank then tackled Manny. Without speaking, a mic click then leaves the decision up to the dispatcher to decide if the click is, first of all, intentional, and secondly, if those on the other end are needing help of any kind. After the shock and tackle, Manny started to come to. As he did, he began screaming and, quote, writhing in pain. With the taser probe still in his chest, the officer grabbed Manny's arms and held his hands behind his back while pushing him into the concrete. A moment I will never forget from the summer of 2020 was marching across the Burnside Bridge in Portland. It felt like there were thousands of us. We had signs, we were shouting chants, but once we were on the bridge, we were asked to lay down on our stomachs with our hands behind our backs for nearly 9 minutes, a symbolic protest against how George Floyd was pushed into the street for the same amount of time. I had a poster to lie on. I didn't have a body on my back or a knee in my neck. I had never thought about the pain of being pinned on a surface like that. Within just a couple of minutes, my knees, face, and chest were seriously uncomfortable due to the rocks, debris, and pavement. It was a serious moment of checking my privilege, not just about people who get pinned to the ground, but those who have to sleep on it. I just hadn't thought of it. And imagining George trying to breathe while being pinned on a painful surface, it was heartbreaking. And the same goes for Manny. Now he had not only been beaten about the head and face, choked, and tasered. He was back on his stomach with his arms behind his back, prongs in his chest, and 2 large men pushing him into the pavement. I can't imagine the pain he was feeling, combined with the terror of knowing his life was in danger. Within a few seconds of holding his hands back, the taser was set off for another 5-second round. Manny screamed out in pain. His body started to twitch while the 2 men remained on top of him. At that point, SM and KL left the scene. As they drove around the car and the men, they continued recording, capturing one of the officers giving the order for Manny to put his hands behind his back, where they already were. The other officer said, quote, "You're going to get it again." SC, the pizza driver, then left as well. And that may sound cruel or terrible, but what do you do in that scenario? Are you going to get help if you call the police on the police? If you approach them, would they just tase, shoot, or beat you? If you have children with you, you can't take that risk. If you have a job you can't lose, you can't take that risk. Maybe if all 3 of them had approached, it would have been different, but that's just part of why our society is trained to keep police on a pedestal. So if you see them doing something like this, your default, or so they hope, is you assume they're doing their job and it's not your situation to interfere with. Once the witnesses left, the taser was set off again, 5 more seconds to the chest. SM dropped her kids off and she returned to the scene, quote, "Because I was scared for Manny. I was just wanted to go figure out what happened to him or why that happened." But by the time she returned, more officers had arrived and they had closed off the area. SC also returned for the same reasons. He too couldn't get close enough to help. It was less than a minute after the witnesses left that Manny first told the officers he couldn't breathe. But he wasn't just saying, "I can't breathe." He was saying, "Can't breathe, sir. Can't breathe. Breathe, sir. Please, sir." A gut-wrenching moment talked about by the family's lawyer during a press conference.
What we learned is he said, "I can't breathe, sir. I can't breathe, sir. I can't breathe, sir." A clear sign that it's not only a struggle for breath, but an attempt to still be respectful in your last moments of life. A sign that he wasn't the aggressive person that law enforcement claimed he was.
Can't breathe, sir. Can't breathe.
In response to Manny's pleas for help, one of the officers said, "Shut the fuck up, man." Apparently, the dispatcher, hearing the scuffle and yells, decided to send backup to the scene. The first to arrive was Timothy Rankin. Let's talk about Timothy Rankin for a moment. He is 6'2", 200 pounds. He joined the Tacoma Police Department in 2018 after serving 6 years in the Army and 2 years with the Department of State as a security contractor. While in the Army, Rankin took a combat life-saving course and was trained in crisis intervention. Then he went through and graduated from the Basic Law Enforcement Academy, but not with flying colors. After his involvement with Manny's death, the Seattle Times looked into Timmy Rankin's history and discovered an upsetting tidbit of information. The academy had actually sent a memo to the Tacoma PD. In that memo, they were warning TPD of concerning behaviors surrounding their newest recruit, Timothy Rankin. It was December 2018 when Rankin was given a test at the academy. As part of a simulated training, Rankin was given the task of completing a welfare check in a park. This controlled simulation was given with the purpose of practicing non-lethal force. In doing that simple welfare check in a park to practice non-lethal force, Timothy shot and killed the simulated person. 2 months after that, he was hired by the TPD. To me, that sounds like a fail. Sounds like this person is not ready to be handed lethal weapons and to be placed in public. But I guess the academy has pretty low standards. Could you imagine getting a test from work, Emily? Like, I don't know, please order these files or do this Excel spreadsheet, and instead you shot your boss and you get to keep your job?
No, I can't.
Or any test and you just don't pass it, let alone hurting someone.
You would think there would be a protocol that after failing that simulation, there's some sort of additional training that would be required and then have to retake it and pass.
Exactly. Yeah, instead it's more just, here's how he did in that.
So what we're learning is that test had no...
Yeah, it didn't matter.
Factor in him graduating or passing?
Apparently not.
So what is the point of it in the first place?
That is a very good and valid question. The academy was nice enough to warn Tacoma with that memo. In it, the instructor of the simulation claimed Rankin went into what is called mental condition black, a term used to describe someone who, triggered via PTSD, has something akin to a panic attack. Seattle Times reporter Patrick Malone said regarding mental condition black, "You lose some of your senses. For instance, there was an auditory exclusion. Rankin was not hearing what his partner was telling him. He was not hearing what was coming across radio traffic to sort of guide his actions."
This seems like a really obvious, not a great fit for your career.
Yeah, we're sorry you can't graduate the academy.
I am well aware how many people coming out of the military have PTSD, but that means you're not equipped to be in that situation where with taxpayer dollars paying your paycheck, protecting people.
Well, in your own danger. If you're going into what's basically a panic attack, that's dangerous for you. For Timothy.
You wouldn't hire someone like that to do air traffic control
exactly.
even. That is not an okay situation. A high pressure job?
Yeah.
No.
How is that even possible that they're okay.
That should have a psychiatrist sign off on that. That's a big problem.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have even let him put that on his resume to apply for the police.
Yeah.
That he passed that in any sort of capacity. I'm real worked up about this.
And that they have a name for the condition and it's that's what happened to him. Then why did he pass?
That should be an automatic, you are not allowed to apply for this.
And here's our therapist number.
Exactly.
Yeah. TPD marked the information from the memo as a red flag, meaning it would eventually need to be dealt with. In going through his public file, the Seattle Times did not find any notation that implied Rankin had received any kind of psychological help or that anything was done in regards to the red flag. It was noted, however, that it was possible he did receive those things, but because it was related to medical care, it didn't appear in his public record.
And they just had that on a to-do list.
They're well, let's keep an eye out on this guy.
We got to paint the shed,
Jeez.
Rake up the leaves, and make sure this guy isn't.
Or basically, let's wait until he fucks up
until he kills someone.
Hugely. Yeah.
And then they just said, well, we noted it.
Yeah. This person told that person, that person told that person.
No one wants to take responsibility of hiring him and passing him.
There's such desperation, too, to have officers that kind of thing is accepted. But shouldn't be.
I have another question about that. Simulation. Is it simulation just like it's a staged interaction?
That's what I took it as, yeah.
And in that, he killed somebody.
Yes, it was.
Wow.
I don't know if it was actually out at a park or if they had just a training facility and they're okay, yeah, exactly, like Cop City. And here's this person laying on a bench, maybe a homeless person or something, go check on them. And that was the welfare check. And somehow it went so awry that he ended up grabbing his lethal weapon, even though the training was specifically about less lethal or non-lethal force.
He couldn't even.
So he failed across the board.
He couldn't fake it through a simulation.
It wasn't even. He failed by going lethal, he failed like the premise of the test, which was non-lethal force.
De-escalation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or, beanbags, or I'm not sure what they expected him to use, but he skipped over a few steps, Within a year of his hiring and the memo, Rankin was involved in another incident where he was accused of excessive force. Dustin Dean was arrested by Timmy Rankin and Messiah Ford, another man you'll hear about in a bit, in a phone video taken just 3 months before Rankin would encounter Manny. He and Ford can be seen dragging Dustin down a flight of stairs. Once off the stairs, Rankin put his knees in Dustin's back as he lay on the ground in prone position. As they did so, Dustin yelled out that they were hurting him, but they didn't stop. After the news coverage of Manny's case, Dustin filed a $500,000 lawsuit against the city of Tacoma.
Did he win?
I believe I didn't see an answer, so I don't know
maybe
if
they
he
paid
won.
him
Yeah.
off to not pursue it.
And that's another issue. Okay, so if you're racist, you don't care if cops kill black people, or you're pro-cop, they should have every right to do whatever they want, fine. What about all that money? Besides what is paid by taxpayers for payroll, tanks, weapons, gear of all kind, not to mention years and years of pensions, there are hundreds of lawsuits annually. The Washington Post found that from 2010 to 2020, more than 7,600 officers were involved in legal settlements, amounting to just over $3.2 billion with a B dollars being given to victims and families of. That money was spread across 40,000 payouts to resolve lawsuits. Of those 7,600 officers, 1,200 of them had been the subject of at least 5 incidents. 200 officers had 10 or more complaints or lawsuits that were financially settled. 10 or more.
That is a money pit. Like, what a waste of funds.
And could you find me another job where you not only hurt people physically, but you're causing financial damage to the company? And they're like, sure, stay on board.
All that takes is some accountant to come in and put that in front of someone, and they'd want to rectify in a normal company.
Right.
If somebody is causing that many lawsuits, you get rid of them.
Yeah.
Or you put them in a position where they're not going to cause lawsuits.
Yeah.
So what
this
is
guy
going
has
on?
an issue. Maybe he should be at a desk.
Those are insane numbers.
Yeah. 10 or more. 2 or more is too much.
Exactly.
The second one is okay, this is obviously an issue.
One puts you on a major probation.
If not
2,
gone.
Yeah. Wow.
Hey, by the way, you cost us $3 million the other day.
That's shocking.
Yeah. I couldn't believe that when I saw 200 of them had 10 or more.
To be a fly on the wall in that conversation of talking about that and being, okay, yeah, I'm okay with that
being
number.
the lawyer going in again, hey, we're here for Officer Johnny again, 8 times the charm.
It's just really crazy when corporate America, I sit and watch people without, it seems, a care in the world lay off 10 people who produce amazing work and never cause an issue.
Yeah, and don't get sued.
And how easy it is for them to let an executive go who has proven themselves to make money for the company.
Yeah.
And then turn around and look at this. You've got bad people doing bad things and causing major debt.
Yeah.
That is a no-brainer to me. Get rid of them.
It's you can't justify it.
They need a consultant to come in and do the firing for them, I guess.
Something.
What is going on?
The argument, like I just said, it's hard to recruit officers or whatever, but is it worth keeping that one guy on?
No.
Who's getting a stamp card of lawsuits?
And he's just learning he's invincible.
Exactly.
He can do whatever the fuck he wants.
Exactly.
And no one cares.
That's a great point.
People can die. You can be a raging racist. No one cares.
Yeah, I can shoot whoever I want, not get away with it.
Yet consequences for stealing a candy bar could result in your death.
Yep.
What a world we live in.
Isn't it nice? On top of that, just imagine what our society as a whole could do with an extra $3 billion a decade. That money could go to teacher pay or healthcare or houselessness, providing food in general, which it breaks down to be about $320 million a year that could be put to better use than, sorry for killing your loved one.
We could probably manage without police if we had everyone fed and home and housed. I think we could do it.
Yeah. That's the point of abolitionists, is to say it's not about having chaos. It's about community care. It's about having food pantries and providing housing and having $320 million to put
I mean, there's
towards
always
something.
going to be bad seeds that are going to need
Absolutely.
the criminal justice
and
system.
people are going to break into homes, and people are going to attack people, and people are going to kill people.
But
so you
maybe
do need
it's-
that kind of
Maybe it's time we do
enforcement.
some A/B testing on this, and each state can try something new and
Yeah.
see who prevails. The world according to Emily.
That and 4-day work weeks. Another lesson from Rankin's Academy report is that officers, especially ones coming from the military, should be screened for PTSD and other mental health issues and be given treatment. All veterans deserve to be cared for, especially if they're going to be given deadly weapons. There were now 3 former military well-trained officers on the scene with Manny. With Rankin's arrival, the protocol would suggest he should have checked for signs of excited delirium, especially since Manny had been tased 3 times. Excited delirium is defined as a medical emergency categorized by agitation, aggression, acute distress, and sudden death, often in pre-hospital settings. If a subject is believed to be suffering from EXD, officers should take care to ensure their subject can breathe and that there is no obstruction or action that is inhibiting their ability to do so. The subject should not be facing down, and there should be no pressure on their neck or throat.
When you are researching these, did you come into any statistics on how many of these scenarios do the officers end up taking life-saving measures?
I didn't see a specific number, but speaking just for myself and working in school settings, I had to have like first aid and CPR and all that stuff. So I would be pretty shocked if police were able to not have kind of some of that basic training.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, do we see the amount of times it's attempted go down because like EMTs get to the scene
Oh, right.
in these scenarios, or do they not do it at all? Do they snap out of whatever they're doing?
I think it's a lot of this case, and I'll get into those details in a moment here. And I think it's a lot of that. I think it's sucked into the moment and the adrenaline, and then it's enemy against me, and I'm on the defense, and that's it.
Is there a name for that?
I don't know. I mean, maybe that mental condition black is part of it, where it's I'm scared and I have to stop this threat.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
You're probably right.
what
But then
that
there's
is.
also the like